All right, so now that we've played the first scenario, we are going to review the system itself, kind of giving a general overview of what makes it unique and what makes it different, and really what makes it worth your money or what makes it avoidable. And to start us out, this game was released in 1981 originally by Chaosium. It's always been published by Chaosium. It hasn't changed hands. It was originally created by a man named Sandy Peterson, who was a huge H.P. Lovecraft fan and really wanted to make a unique system, a unique game based upon the lore of H.P. Lovecraft. It uses a D100 system for rolling dice, and also uses Chaosium's basic role-playing system, which is open source system that anybody can pick up and use. They have it published and licensed out for general purpose. And yeah, there's actually several different games that use it as well. So it's basically any D100 system that you use, or at least the majority of them, will use this system or something similar. And some of the unique features of this game particularly are fragile characters, investigators that you play as, the onion peel mystery as they call it, and the sanity system, all of which I think you guys were able to see. So sure. What do you guys think?
As somebody who has predominantly done like D&D, where you are this big, larger-than-life hero who eventually like taken out dragon kneecaps and that kind of thing, it's really refreshing to be kind of an everyman who is not just like punching ghouls in the face. Like, you have to kind of think of it like, how would I actually try to survive this situation? Because fighting isn't it.
The basic Cthulhu rules are like as hardcore as the hardcore D&D rules.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean, in the scenario we just played, like, the first time somebody got hurt, they got a major, almost died.
Yeah, almost died. By a piece of furniture.
Yeah. Like,
not a dragon.
No, like, yeah.
It was a piece of furniture.
There was no, like, oh, you take 1 point of damage because like, you got bit by an... Like, no, you got hit by a bed out a window.
Yeah.
You're almost dead now.
I think out of the unique features, though, the sanity system in Cthulhu is the one that, like, hooked me the most the first time I played it, just because it's like it's well defined on what it does, but so open-ended on like the consequences of it, and like it really gives like, it's almost like damage that the environment does to you, you know, like it really reinforces that like environment as a threat aspect of Cthulhu.
I haven't got to the point where it's like really affecting stuff, like in a different play session that we've been a part of. There's been a little bit, but I'd be really curious to see what it's like when like a large chunk of your party goes insane to the point where like, how much can you trust what the keeper is telling you is happening? And I think that'd be really cool. There's a lot of like really good novels that kind of play with the unreliable narrator, and I feel like this is the way that tabletop role playing is doing it. And that seems...
And one of the things about this system is it talks about how when you go insane, there are possibilities of seeing delusions, and you can actually stop and check whether they're real or not. The risk reward of it being that if you go to check and you fail your roll, you actually take more sanity damage because you're losing your grip that much more on reality.
Like, we might have just made really good rolls, but I feel not a lot of sanity loss was present in the quick start scenario, which, like, kind of understandable. We might have missed some spots, too, where we might have taken more sanity damage because we don't know all
there was
the different
like 4
areas of it.
We didn't even go in.
Yeah.
Well, based on what the scenario, the haunting, sets up, there are 3 main areas that you can take sanity, one being the bed, one being the knife, and the last one, the major one, being seeing Corbett
Dead
himself.
Body.
Yeah, and with Corbett, you could actually take 1d8 of damage for sanity if you failed your roll. Of course, Jody, your Matthew character did not fail his roll, so he only took 1. However, had you failed, you could take a d8.
Yeah.
With Cthulhu, if you take 5 or more at one point, you go insane, and so you experience what they call a temporary bout of madness, and that's where things really get fun. So I agree with your statement that it's like this scenario is designed so the chances of going insane are very slim, but they're still there.
Yeah, and like I kind of get it too, because you don't want to turn off like a first time player with like 10 minutes into the game their character goes insane. Yeah.
Yeah, and Jaden, yourself, you took he rolled an extreme success on you, and that's why you took so much damage. It wouldn't have been that bad had you not failed your roll, right? I think what's interesting to me from a gameplay perspective, and I'd like your thoughts on it, Jaden, is you went from your persona as this big burly man to somebody who was almost decimated by a knife in one hit. Like, how do you feel about that?
I thought it was wicked. I like that kind of, it just brings a real gritty realism that I think is more indicative of what we're used to in our regular life, right? Like, the things hit you all the time, take you down, and you're way more beaten up from it, and it actually seems impactful, right? If I take 11 damage in other systems, it's like, okay, well, that's just one other thing, but me going down and really getting close to being dead and then getting knocked out on top of it seems reasonable, taking a knife to the chest, right? So I think it just ties you a lot more to the system and makes it feel a little bit more real than a lot of other things would, because you don't have any real connection to stuff like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. As a dungeon master, or in this case they call it the keeper of arcane lore perspective, the sanity and the combat really exercise your brain. You begin to think, if somebody does something other than what you expect, you have to really run around in your mind and say, okay, what's going to happen? How am I going to respond to this? Because, of course, you don't want it to just be like, you present something that has potential and they run away from it, and then you're like, oh no, you're forced there. Like, you don't want to force the gameplay. And so when you guys don't respond in the way that you the way that is expected, it really makes you almost rethink the entire scenario to present that mystery, present the sanity sometimes as would be beneficial. There was a couple of times where I gave you guys hooks, or at least I thought I did, in order to get you to go to a place, and then you just didn't.
Like where? Like which one?
Well, you guys never went to the Hall of Records or the library. The library was mentioned like twice. Oh no, you did go to the Hall of Records actually, but you didn't go to the library, and I mentioned the library twice. And what I thought was really funny is I believe one of you said, oh, we can't go to the library because, there probably won't be anything there. But in the scenario book, it tells me, it's in the scenario book, it tells me that there's like 5 pieces of information that I could have given you. Like, it was the most influential spot.
Yeah.
Sorry, gang.
And that's it's something I actually like about all of the professionally made Cthulhu scenarios that I've done, is that information is king in a lot of ways, and you have to find out what you're going up against before you go up against. Otherwise you just do what we did, and we kicked down the front door and just got almost wrecked by telepathic furniture. And, it's cool. The way that you actually, the investigation is feels like a phase of the adventure. If you want to use game terms, there's the investigation phase, and then the actual going out into the place you're investigating, or where the adventure ends, the climax point. And the investigation part has call back to D&D or other role-playing games, the investigation is more usually just a minor part to get you to the dungeon to go kill things, where in these scenarios it's a big part of it, and it's a core aspect of it, and it's very different. And it's cool, and it's great for role players, people that just want to go do combat, maybe not so much, but people that actually doing the RP and talking things out and thinking it out, definitely. It's good for them.
And you're right in the fact that it is that is almost the main purpose of this game, is the role playing and the investigation. The idea that the mystery is a bigger reward than the combat.
Well, and I think that ties itself back to the onion peel mystery, to use the term that they apply to it. Like, you have to peel out those layers to really appreciate everything. If you just, I mean, keeping with the onion metaphor, if you just like cut to the heart of it, you're missing a ton of stuff. You're not really appreciating all the different layers that are built into the system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Cthulhu's like ogres, right?
Yeah. And parfaits.
Yeah.
Everybody likes parfaits.
Yeah. And, again, going back to that keeper perspective, unfortunately, I've never had the chance to be an investigator. But from the keeper perspective, it's both... I both lament when you guys don't get a piece of information that I think is really cool, but I also go, oh, but I could run that again for somebody else, or even the same group, and they would get something completely different.
See, my perspective as somebody who's running a game, when I know the players are going to walk into, like, a trap that they don't know about, I get all, like, excited.
Serves them right.
Oh, you walk in without checking, huh? Okay.
I bet you wish you looked at the map.
Don't worry.
Now.
I'm just rolling these. Yeah, I'm just rolling these for fun. I just like the sound. No, it's great. Let's actually use that to move into the skill system. We did mention that it's a D100, but within that, the character sheet itself is quite large and dense with information. There is a number of skills that you can use. It's very similar to D&D 3.5 edition, I believe, where it uses individual skills rather than large ideas to do something. And then as well, on top of that, you also have your characteristics, your stats for your character that determines, things like their strength, their dexterity, their constitution. Any skill that you can't find underneath the list of skills, you can manipulate by using a characteristic, right? So, forcing the planks off the wall with your bare hands, well, you don't have a skill for that, so you use strength instead. And then, of course, you have your combat in there and everything. What are some positive things that we can say about the skill system?
Again, so like we never mentioned it when we were doing the gameplay, but these are characters that like we created ourselves. These aren't pre-made characters. And it really, because there's so many skills, you can really, as somebody who likes to do like the role-playing aspect, you can really fine-tune the character that you want to. So, like, when I made Bob, I had in my head that he was, like, the stereotypical grizzled, like, old film noir kind of detective. And because I decided to make him old, I purposely gave him, bad listening, because that fits the character of being an older person. I kind of steered away from, the brawling and, the physical demanding ones, because he's an older person. But because he's, so weathered, I gave him more of, the interpersonal skills, because he's interacted with a lot of people. And having that fine-tuned skills, it really made it cool to kind of fully flesh out a character a little bit more, whereas I find sometimes you kind of this is what I want to do, and then after the first game session you're just I'm just gonna do what's probably the strongest and the easiest way to get through this whole mission.
I think you've made a really valuable point there that I've actually never thought about before, and it's not so much the skills that you do have as it's the ones you also don't have. And it's not like you're oh, I don't have this skill, so I'm going to try to get that skill. It's oh, I don't have the skill, so I'm going to think of an alternative approach to this problem.
Yeah. I'm pretty vocally, I really like the skill system in Cthulhu because of how specialized you can be and how, much difference that creates between people. And then, the different ways that you can use each, general skill. The repair skills, mechanical and electrical, and your persuade skills, library use and researching and looking through information is a skill. Mm-hmm. And then there's my favorite part about it is the levels of success, the different ones, not in other systems where it's just a hard set pass or a hard fail, where there's a normal success, a hard success, and an extreme success, and they all have a really well-defined range. You roll under this number and you get a better outcome, and it's not as much up to everybody's discretion as saying okay, it's either a success or a failure, and if you roll a 20, maybe there's something cool because you rolled a 20. in Cthulhu, the skills actually have a defined, like, awesome outcome or normal outcome.
And they feel attainable, right? Like
yeah.
in D&D,
yeah.
you have to roll a 20 for something good to happen, like really awesome to happen. But even if like your extreme success is like a 6, you're like, ooh, there's like 6 possible rolls that I can get this, as opposed to like I have to roll a 20.
That's actually a really good point too. In like some games, you're fighting to get up to a certain point with bonuses. Whereas this system where you're rolling under a certain point and then there's tiers of success in there, I agree. It feels more attainable. It's not like, okay, how do I have to like upgrade my character to reach a higher roll? It's more of like you actually feel like you can roll under it because I like it.
And actually, on that point, I just realized that we never even went into the upgrade part of that system, which, you know, during the game, I said to you guys to check off, and we might actually have to delete that part of it now, but to check off the skills as you use them, because at the end, what would happen is you would then roll, and if you got over your skill, which is one of the only times you want to roll over, and so if you had a 50 in spot hidden, you would want to roll at least a 51 or higher. And if you did, you would then get to add 1d10 roll to that skill to upgrade it permanently. And so it rewards you on having done something successfully, I guess with the philosophy that if you know how to do it right, you are better at that skill.
I will say that I agree with one critique that I've heard of the system where like sometimes it feels like you don't possess very many just like natural, say like athletic skills, or like in a modern Cthulhu setting, say like pretty much anybody who's alive in a like electronically literate society could do some pretty solid researching, you know, like use a catalog system to research through something, but you need a specific skill for that. And then like things like swimming and like just like climbing up like a wall or something, like an average physically fit person could do most of those things, but you still have like a pretty low chance. But at the same time, that can easily be worked around, or like you can just like, it's just like in real life, I guess. If you never put any emphasis into learning how to climb things, you also wouldn't. But yeah.
It incentivizes trying some of the lesser skills, because the only way you're going to get better at them is doing them, which I mean is true to life. But it incentivizes going for those Hail Mary, like, screw it, I'm going for a Mythos roll. I know there's only 1%, but to hell with it. Like,
And there are a couple of ways to artificially increase the probability or even the improbability of those rolls, right? Like we already mentioned the regular, hard, extreme, which you could roll something and you get a regular success. But if that something is harder than the average person would be able to do, the difficulty is set as probably hard. Or if it's near impossible, the difficulty is set at extreme. So if you don't get a hard or extreme, you still fail despite being successful at a regular roll. Likewise, you also have the penalty and bonus dies where it's like, you know, this is where I think, Jody, your climb, like it's just a ladder, but it's a little rickety. Well, you know, you could probably climb it, and you know what, let's add a bonus die because you're going to take your time to do that rather than trying to get up quickly. So there are ways to play around with that, and I think what it comes down to is either your player suggesting like, hey, could I get a bonus for this because, or the keeper being savvy enough of the system to say, why don't you give me this with this other thing because. Yeah.
And I'd say too that the spending luck to affect skill rolls is a very cool mechanic. And like having that be like another pool of resources that you have to manage is cool, because every time you want to spend luck, you're thinking like in 20 minutes, I might have to use that luck to avoid getting shot by someone. Yeah. So like, do I need to use it to pick this lock to get some money? Or do I hold on to that luck so that I don't get shot in the face? And it's an interesting decision. Yeah,
I'm real stringent. I won't spend more than like 2 or 3 luck at a time, ever.
You know, it comes down to, though, if you are in a situation where it's like you could die, you might end up spending a ton of luck just to survive. Yeah. Which actually also goes hand in hand with the push system. So pushing the roll, being given an automatic reroll, so long as you can justify why you deserve that. And how do we feel about the push system?
I think it lines up really good with the whole risk-reward system in general. This game really just exudes all that, right? Everything can be done, but is it worth the cost, and where are you going to roll back with that? And I think that just makes things all feel like a lot more hands-on instead of just waiting there and doing your, I'm going to do this one thing and what happens. You're continually kind of evaluating what's worth it and what isn't worth it in the situation. I think that just makes a much more stimulating gameplay for sure.
And on the notice of stimulus, it gets for really intense moments of some drama, especially if you sit there and embellish it of like, listen, you can do it. Here's what happens if you fail. And I imagine as a player, you're almost trembling as you roll the dice to try to figure out, am I going to make it? Speaking of making it, why don't we talk about some encounters here? So we know that the Cthulhu system really de-emphasizes combat. You're a fragile investigator who could die at a moment's notice, and like Jody pointed out, there was almost a TPK. So going back to this whole, combat is deadly. Mythos is scarier than anything you've ever done in real life. And sometimes it's best to just run away. A few times there was the idea pointed out, like, let's get rid of this knife. Let's just put it somewhere it can't reach us.
Yeah, well, like I said at the beginning, like it's really refreshing to play a system you are not omnipowerful. Yeah. And if times it feels like you're not supposed to win. Like it feels like sometimes you're meant to lose and you're just not prepared for this at the moment, and that's okay. It's kind of similar to, I know, like, Ruin, you're a big fan of like the Dark Souls games. It kind of feels like that sometimes. Where sometimes it's like, you know what, I am in this fight. I am definitely not meant to be in this fight yet. I definitely need to go and figure out other stuff and then come back. I don't think we got a huge sense of that in this one because other than the knife and like the bed sucker punching, Jody in the face. In our other playthrough that we've done, which is like a lengthier version of the system, there's definitely times when we've been like, we are not supposed to be here yet. We need to go solve more of the mystery, get better prepared, and then come back. Either we need to find a way to weaken him or to strengthen us. And that's really cool because, playing D&D most of the time, by the time you get to something, you should be able to beat it for the most.
I like in this scenario that we just played, like, I feel there probably was some information that if we had known, we could have been much better prepared to know what we were expecting. Was there anything that would have prepared us for like things flying at us, like in the library there?
Well, she mentioned it when we talked to the doctor. She said she mentioned like objects flying around. I was thinking books. I was not thinking furniture.
Yeah.
Well, she said in the bedroom.
Yes, but
fair play. Yeah, we just kind of didn't take it seriously. It's like, sure, things are flying around, whatever.
Yeah.
To be fair, she was insane. The only thing that I can think of that you guys missed that would have really prepared you in terms of like violence and things like that is there's a moment where I told you that Vittorio was saying things. He was looking at a Bible and saying things, but they weren't from the Bible. Yeah. And if you had asked what it was he was saying, he would have said that the devil is bested by his own weapon.
Oh.
And so to try to point you into the
that
idea
makes
of the
sense
knife.
Now. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
See, and it's like that. That's what I like a lot about the combat in Cthulhu so far, is that like they're hard odds and you can die quickly, but with the right knowledge, you can also go in like a professional and get it done clean. Like if we had known that, right? If we had heard that information, we could have been like, okay, whatever attacks us, we have to use to kill the boss, and it would have been a lot cleaner, And just like other scenarios we've done, it's like an impossible quote unquote task, but once you get the information, you can set up, you can prepare, you can go in carefully and actually like execute a plan instead of fighting a big like stats based battle for 20 minutes, where you're just rolling dice.
It's also cool because by and large, most people are less familiar with the Cthulhu verse than they are with like medieval creatures. Like everyone knows Cthulhu, but like I had no idea, like, was this just a zombie? Was this something? So like in my head, I couldn't like try to max min like, okay, I know a dragon. I know that in mythology, dragons, magic, that like I couldn't rely on base knowledge. Everything was, which is cool because you have to really experience it in the moment and figure it out. You can't rely on what you already know.
I think even though you missed out on that vital clue, though, and I know we're going back to the idea of like the system, but the fact that you still figured out, maybe by fluke, that if I stab this thing and I by fluke I stabbed this thing with its own weapon and he died immediately, like what went through your mind as that went down that way?
I was kind of just RPing that my guy was sort of giving into the like voice in his head that was like giving violent thoughts, and I just like the cross didn't seem to do anything, and it was the only other weapon I was holding, so it's kind of desperation, honestly. It was not like an elaborate plan. I was just like, well, this knife is crazy, so it's going to give me some like extra damage at least, so let's do it. As
a bystander, I thought it was just like, oh, we're done? Oh, okay, that's kind of anticlimactic. It was just like, oh, what? Like that's the lamest ending to a story that I've seen, because I didn't clue in even like until you just said it. I didn't clue in that the knife did extra damage. I thought it was just like, oh, the big bad boss was like just like a real weak guy. But all right, I guess.
Yeah, actually, no, he had. So when you guys walked into the house, he actually cast a spell, and I did it for him. That gave him 8 points of damage reduction. Just the first 8 would have been struck off the table. But the key to that whole fight was you could kill him normally by taking damage, or if you hit him with his knife, it was an instant kill. And it was just pure luck. That, Matthew stabbed him with his own knife first.
I'll say I would critique the scenario that they put with the quick start thing. Like, the mystery's neat, and there's a lot of places to go and like find information. But maybe because we skipped a couple parts, I didn't feel like there was that many interactable characters other than just like getting information. And then if I would like to somebody that wanted to run this for other people, I would say like you could probably get away with adding some kind of other confrontation. Like, we're asking around, like, and people think that we're nuts, so like these just like bored dudes that were getting drunk on the street corner like start harassing us, and it's either like talk your way out or like fist fight your way out kind of situation. Just to add like some other kind of encounter other than that like puzzle boss, because other than that it didn't really show the combat that much.
I was thinking the same thing. And what I came to was that the cult really didn't play a big... Like, I'm sure that there's some lore reason as to why Corbett is there and why he's in the shape that he's in. But it felt like they were like, oh, like, yeah, there was this cult and there was a bunch of shady dealings with it, and they were very powerful and right nearby. And I was expecting us to run into either some kind of cult practice or some occultists or something, that like that was going to be some kind of combat or some kind of other puzzle or obstacle we were going to have to solve. And again, maybe we just missed it because we didn't go to the Hall of Records or really investigate them. And, but yeah, they just they were mentioned, but then didn't show up.
Yeah, like there was several more documents. Like I think you guys got the one titled 8.
Yeah.
But like you guys missed basically 3 through 7.
3 through 7.
Yeah. So
that I'd say is a bonus of this scenario. There's a lot of hidden things.
There was 9 documents in total that you could have found, and I want to say 5 of them were they were at the library. And I will say though that like what you guys were looking for, of some sort of payoff of like the cult coming back. Nope, it's not there. The cult is defunct, basically. Their leader went to jail. The leader was actually the executor of Walter Corbett's, I believe his name's Walter, estate. Although Corbett himself is described as a sorcerer who has somehow found the ability to live. But there's really the only encounter that you guys could have possibly had that you didn't in terms of combat is if you had harassed Artie, the editor of the newspaper, after he told you to leave, which he didn't because you guys succeeded your role, he would have gotten 2 maintenance men to come along and try to strong arm you out of the way.
Nice. Was the newspaper part actually part of the scenario? And like I just luckily chose to be a reporter?
Absolutely, it was.
Neat.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
Yeah, which is a good point to say that you guys had zero indication of where this was going to go ahead of time. I kind of hit that from you. Which I guess if we want to move on to the world building aspect of it, and the access to the lore. One of you said earlier, like, I know a dragon. I know what a dragon does. I know what it looks like. I know how generally to kill a dragon. When it comes down to the world building of Cthulhu, how accessible is it to you?
I am not super well versed in whole Cthulhu's. Again, like, I know Cthulhu. I've read a couple of Lovecraftian stories, but not a ton. I mean, it's accessible in that, like, I didn't feel like I didn't understand what was going on, but it's not super accessible. I guess accessible is not the right word for this, but, like, it's not familiar. It's still very new, and I don't know what to expect, which I think is a good thing rather than a negative.
I would say the unfamiliarity actually, like, is an advantage of it a little bit, because, like, the mystery and horror and being scared of what you're coming, like, into contact with is part of the experience. And it's like, if you know what everything is, then you could just sort of metagame it. Whereas if you actually have to do an investigation and figure out for yourself what it is because you don't know, I think that's really cool. And, like, I think it's really accessible because it's just a system that you can put into it's like the real world, you're playing in the real world. So you go in and you role play and, like, think through problems very, like, easily, because you're not, like, you don't have to wrap your head around, like, the fact that you're fighting a giant fantasy creature, right? Like, a lot of the game is just going through the real world, and it's pretty accessible that way. And, like, there's access to so much lore and stories and stuff like that if you want to go find out, especially for people that want to run games and, like, tell interesting stories inside the, like, mythos. There's so much at your disposal. But at the same time, it's also kind of hard to sift through because it's in the form of novels and stuff. And, like, part of the mystery of the novels is that they don't really explain a lot of it really well. So a lot of it's left up to the imagination.
On the note of imagination, I have heard one other player before mention that they thought Lovecraft, or they felt Lovecraft, was lazy in the idea that, like, you can't tell me that there's not some way that I could imagine this creature besides saying it's unimaginable, and I kind of defer to the idea that sometimes less is more, but I definitely understand that for people who are perhaps less imaginative, that can be an issue.
A lot of it's intangible too. Like, it's things that they don't have a physical manifestation, like the thing that we fought. It was like a kind of like seemed like a spirit, we had to kill like an effigy that then, like, the spirit lost power.
Are you telling me that there is not a bat-winged tentacled deity under the sea slumbering for all eternity until it rises up to devour us all?
I mean, has anyone looked?
Mariana's Trench is pretty ominous. Jaden, this was your first experience with Call of Cthulhu as a role-playing system. How did you feel that you were able to navigate within the confines of the world?
I didn't find it to be too difficult by any means. I think it's honestly a pretty straightforward in lots of ways. Like everything, it's got nuance and depth to it, but I just feel like it's pretty accessible in a lot of ways. You're not outside in any crazy world until you slowly kind of slip crazier and crazier. So it's just right off the bat, you're kind of feel like you're just ready to go. You don't got to set yourself up for any sort of disbelief or anything. It's just like, okay, I'm out for a normal stroll, and then holy crap, now there's this old bag of bones here. And we kind of got there after, I got stabbed and some beds went flying. So it slowly kind of worked its way in. I think it was a pretty smooth transition, not anything too difficult to get.
You were able to navigate fairly easily, yeah. I will say that in terms of understanding, it could be easy or it could be difficult to wrap your head around what you're seeing in these games. It could be easy if you have a good knowledge of horror themes, and not even necessarily Lovecraft himself, but movies and the genre as a whole. But if you haven't immersed yourself even a little bit, or even indulged yourself in like a haunted house or something like that at a carnival, I could see understanding and immersing yourself into that scare, that unease, could be difficult. being scared is not something somebody does sometimes.
I think it also really depends on the scenario you're playing, because like there's some where you're solving a puzzle and that eliminates the threat, versus like there's some where like you're fighting snake people, like, or cultists that are trying to bring back a dead god or something, right? Those would be much more like generally like you don't have to use a lot of imagination to like get through. Okay, we're tracking down the cult, we're going to find the cult, we destroy their artifacts, they have no power anymore. Versus like we need to solve a like millennia old puzzle so that the stars align and like the ancient old one goes away. There's like there's so much room for different adventures in this framework.
Very true. So moving on, the actual accessibility of this game. What I'd like to focus on here is how easy is it for somebody to pick up this system, understand the rules, and kill a few hours with enjoyment. We're going to try to focus on the quick start rules here.
Yeah.
So I know Cade and Jody, you have a little bit of knowledge beyond the quick start. Try to put that on a shelf for now.
I just think that as like a walking into it with very little knowledge, I didn't find that it was very difficult to pick up. Like I've played a little bit of tabletop games, but not anything too extensive where I could be like, oh man, I can just pick up a system like that. But 16 pages, and I think they picked like the most key things to slap in those 16 pages to get you ready to go with everything.
Yeah. I would agree. I read through it, and it's pretty much all you need. I'd say it's, like, in a way, it's a little, like, too geared towards accessibility for me. Like, I'm kind of, like, an advanced role-playing game player, so that could just be bias, but the way they recommend doing all of the skills and attributes and stuff with, like, preset points that you just choose, like, this is 50, this one's 70, whatever. It's good to get it done fast and to make it uncomplicated, but I don't think that I read through it and I don't think I saw like an alternate, like the alternate ways to do it, like even just mentioned there. And I think some people might, like to do that, especially if you've played other role-playing before. But you can also easily just do that yourself if you want to. Like just ask with the GM. I think that they like at the start in like the quick start character creation rules where they mention sanity and they like don't really flesh it out that well as to how important it is, but then in the next section about sanity towards the end they do. So like if you've already created your character and then you're reading the rest of it, you might not have understood how important sanity was. So that's one critique I'd say on it.
Well, especially if you use the power as your dump stat. You took the lowest stat and you put it into power, and then later on you find out that I have a really low sanity. Like, and there's a chance that I could lose because of that. Yeah.
But other than like two little nitpicky things that really are just because I've played a lot of games and like, understand the rules already, I think it was pretty straightforward. Especially the combat, the way that they explain the combat and like how simply that was done. Very, very well done. Like a third of a page or something like that, and it basically fully explains combat.
Yeah, I agree. It set it up so that you could pick it up really quickly, and jump straight into your first play. Yeah. You're obviously not getting the full sense of what the entire game looks like and what a longer campaign is going to do. Yeah. But that's not the point of a quick start.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just to kind of get your feet wet with the system and see if you like it before you have to go and sync the whole kit and everything. Yeah. So yeah, I think it does a really good job of introducing the system, making it so that you're not lost, but you get that sense that there's more that could be going on. And yeah, just kind of getting you dumped into the world, because I think that's the strong, this whole system, the way it can create worlds and it has for you to jump in and the mystery. I think for like the storytelling and the world building is the really strong point, and the quick start is a really good way to kind of rush you through any shortcomings or any weird things you might not be familiar with, so that you can immediately get hooked on.
And let's make no mistake here, the rules can get far more complex. There are parts where you read through the scenario, which you guys didn't get to, but I did, and it talks about, in this book there is a spell, and if they took X amount of days, they could learn this spell. Mm-hmm. The spell rules aren't even mentioned in your guys' quick start.
That's a bone that I had to pick with it, actually.
And what's that?
That they didn't, they mentioned magic points at the start, and then there's no mention of magic later on in the quick start rules. And it's like, even if they just mentioned that there's spells in the universe, but they're mysterious, and they have dire implications if you mess up casting them, would just like create so much mystery to be like, oh wow, that sounds really interesting, and if I hear about magic in this game, I want to investigate. But they didn't. They just mentioned magic points and then no rules on magic. I was kind of surprised about that.
To be fair, though, you can play through a full campaign and not music.
Yeah, we've done multiple, and I've never seen one
campaign that
cast.
We just did had no magic in it, and like I came into the quick start having already played through a full campaign and not knowing how spells really work in the system, just because we never use them. It's rare. Also good to know that like these powerful magic spells are there, but you don't need them to defeat the big bad guy.
Yeah,
right.
Which is especially a contrast to other role-playing games where magic is considered might, that they basically go, well, you don't need this, and it's there, but like one of the things you guys didn't get to see is that entire time that I was using Corbett myself as a keeper, I was spending magic points.
Yeah.
And I was rolling for spells, and to me that's almost I don't think that's beneficial for the keeper to see that side of it and the players not to. Because what a cool mechanic to be able to show you, but because I'm hidden behind the screen, I'm not interacting with you that way. Other than you might have sensed it by me saying, hey, make a power roll.
Yeah, it goes back to the onion peel mystery term, I believe. Just because, like, that's part of it, right? Once we know that magic exists and that these people aren't just crazy, then we could go and investigate it and try and figure it out. But it's kind of on us, because in the real world, today somebody said, there's a magic spellcaster down the block. We'd be like, yeah, okay, sure there is. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so I guess to move this along a little bit further here, let's talk about pros and cons, and let's start right away here with our pros of this system. If you guys had to choose one or two major positives to highlight about this, what would you say?
I think it's positive. Like, one of the biggest positive with it is how unique it is compared to other systems. It doesn't feel like it's a copy and paste job from some of the bigger systems. And it's familiar enough that you can jump in if you've played tabletop role-playing games and kind of know what you're doing. But it's different enough that you aren't... you're still surprised by stuff. And I think that way they have it set up really lends itself well to story. Because you're a weakling, you're an average person, not some gigantic hero, and sometimes that's how you tell the best stories, because you're not the Arnold Schwarzenegger of the situation, some Michael Cera.
Yeah.
I'm always the Michael Cera, let's be real.
I would say that the two pros that I really like, I think, kind of go hand in hand, and I think that's the fragility of your characters, and then the attrition of the different points, like sanity and luck and hit points, all that stuff just being so limiting in a lot of ways, and you want to be careful with it all, that it makes it feel way more intense. Whereas, something like D&D, you're a badass, and you always think you are, and there's no problem with that. And then this one, I didn't feel like it even from the beginning, and I tried to build the toughest guy that I could. And I didn't feel tough at any point, other than when I scared the little man, but I didn't even scare him. He just was more happy to see me. So I think that just gives it like a real gritty realism to it, for sure, that you don't get in a lot of other ways, I feel like. And it just makes it feel intense right from the beginning. Like, walking into the house even seemed a little more scary, whereas normally, kick down that door, I'm going to go find whatever's in there. Yeah. Falling down the stairs was even an intense moment, where in lots of games, going down the stairs doesn't even matter.
Yeah. I would go like first that the game's like a role-playing paradise. Like, if you want to actually like act out your character and interact with like other just normal people and do like a lot of social interaction, and like also role play with your skills instead of like it just being a check to see if you go from point A to point B. You actually get to use your character's unique like expertise to contribute, or like flukily, like what I did, create a character that was a journalist, and one of the main like NPCs we interacted with was a newspaper editor. And then the other thing I would say, I think, is like the most unique mechanical aspect of Cthulhu is, like I was talking about earlier, the different levels of success and failure in skills, and how it's defined really well, that you roll like above or below this and you get different outcomes instead of just a hard pass fail. I like it. Creates a lot more tension when you're doing stuff.
Yeah, and I would agree with a lot of what you guys said in terms of especially the role playing as a keeper. Like I've been a dungeon master for Pathfinder before and Warhammer, and I didn't feel like I really got to just spread my wings and tell the story. A lot of it always felt like, you know, we were kind of, I don't want to say going through the motions, but like things were set very well.
Yeah.
Whereas with this, in the heat of a moment, I can describe something in a way that really flexes my imagination. Like whether I did that or not in this episode, you know, the ability is there. And so both on a player level, but as a keeper, a dungeon master, it opens up so many possibilities, you know. And then as well as that, and actually adjacent to that is, we already mentioned the different skill systems and how they interconnect, right? Like if you guys had failed a sanity roll and gone insane, I could have taken complete control of your character and made them do whatever I want. And yet I'm supposed to be like a fair referee. Yeah. So it's not like I'm going to punish you. It's that I'm going to fully react in a way that is more than just, you broke your leg. You know, you did these things. It's like the expression yes and or yes but, right? Like those are the ways to play this. And in the I guess in the opposite direction of that is what were things that you guys found were limiting? What would be one or two things that you found didn't make this system as awesome to play as others?
I don't think I would recommend this system for somebody who's never played a tabletop role because of just how punishing it can be. I could see that being really frustrating for somebody who's never played it'd be like if you've never played a video game before and we plopped you down in Dark Souls, you would probably be turned off a video game.
Yeah.
And I could see that being a similar thing that would happen for somebody jumping into this system who's never done dice roll, character building, that kind of... If you're an experienced person, I would say jump into it. It's fantastic. But I do think that if you've never, ever done it before, just the difficulty level could be a little bit of a turn.
Yeah, I could see it being pretty crushing to, like, get to that last area and all three people got killed by, like, a floating knife. And you're like, oh...
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad
I could see people not laughing about getting knocked out of a window by a bed like we did if you've never experienced games like this before.
Tabletop RPGs already have this kind of negative connotation sometimes, although it seems like it's gaining popularity. But there are lots of articles of like, you know, what isn't a tabletop RPG? Because people think that it's a bunch of nerds hiding in their basement with buck teeth and glasses, which is only half true. My teeth have been fixed. But you know, and they're never going to get a girlfriend. Also false. I have a wife. But you know, there's all these problems with them, and that's why they're playing games. And I think that if you throw this system at them, people might actually think that because it's so punishing that they're like, well, must take a genius to play that. On the other hand, I do think the normality of the world could be accessible. So long as your keeper was fair and didn't then just TPK everybody because, you know, you almost have to feel your audience, which can be another negative, right?
Yeah. I wouldn't play this if you live in the 70s. Satanic Panic would have had a field day with this game.
That was a real thing.
It really was. It's great.
I gotta say, this is like unrelated to the cons of it, but I think the view that like tabletop games are just for nerds died like 5-6 years ago. Honestly, there's like nerdy stuff is the cool stuff now, man. But anyway,
I think you're gaining. I would say you're right in the regard that it's gaining popularity. I don't know if it is there right now. You know, like this is,
dude, 70,000
conversation for side table.
Yeah,
our next episode.
You're right. You're not wrong.
There you go. Okay. You're right.
You're
right, Jody. Let's go back to the con.
I was like just thinking yesterday when I was thinking about this. Like, there's no loot in Cthulhu, you know, and like loot is fun. It's like a dopamine rush. It's something to chase after. And like I've played like 3 or 4 different adventures in one long campaign now. And I've never like got something that I was like, sweet, this is something I want to keep and like like put on my shelf for like use in the next adventure. So that's one con I would say. If you like loot games, this isn't really for you. Like you want to go find your +2 like magic greatsword, it's not the game for you. Really the only other one I would say, like I actually like the punishing aspect of it, so I actually couldn't put that down as a con. I like hardcore things, so like being able to go crazy and shoot yourself, you know, it like I think it's a cool aspect of it, and it makes you respect the world. But a con, they don't let you recover from bad things happening to you very well. Like the healing rules and stuff of like 1 HP per day, or like you can only restore 1 HP with first aid after getting injured, makes it so that like when you're hurt, you almost feel like you have to quit in a way. And that kind of sucks, but you know, there's probably ways around it too, using like magical powers and like professional treatment.
There was a moment, actually a couple of moments in this scenario where I was like, they're going to walk away and they're just going to burn the house down. Like they're done.
I was thinking about it.
Jaden, cons.
Well, I can't think of any major cons from my personal side. I feel like I don't really have maybe enough experience to really critique it to too high of a level, but I would say that if you're newer to role-playing in any sense, or just even, you know, only played certain games where role-playing especially isn't very key, this game is super role-play heavy, and I would argue that that's probably one of the harder parts for at least a certain majority of people when it comes with tabletop games, is even being able to put themselves in that place of even trying to be another character. They're so used to being themselves, and that could be asking a lot of other people to really throw themselves into it and try and be something more. And I think the more you throw yourself into this game, the way more rewarding it's going to be. And if you can't get there, you might be pretty bored, right? Like, I mean, what was it? Majority of what we did was just role-playing, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was wicked. But if that's not your speed, or you get this idea of what a tabletop game is, or thinking it should be like a video game, you're going to come into this and you're going to be like, oh, that was a lot of talking.
And especially, you know, from a keeper perspective, again, is because there's such an emphasis on role-playing. Had you guys not said anything, that story wasn't going anywhere, right? It's so hard to spoon-feed that information in a way that isn't coddling and is genuine.
Yeah, and both sides kind of have to be for the role-playing, too. Whoever's running it has to be prepared for it, and whoever's playing does, too. Whereas, like, certain other systems, you could just, like, bump up the enemy spawns, you know? Like, do whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, and, you know, leading up to this game, there was moments where, in my head, I'm going, okay, how am I going to do that voice? Like, how do I make them sound different from others? And then there's moments when you're playing the game where you're like, wait, did that sentence sound the same, like, accent as the last one? Or even if you guys had run into a random character that I hadn't planned for, it's like, oh, now I got to make up that voice. Absolutely. Okay, well, we've seemingly talked about most of what this game has to offer, the different structurings, pros and cons. So let's do this in reverse order now of why should people avoid this system if they're looking for a new tabletop role-playing game.
Like I said earlier, I think the only reason to avoid this game, I guess the two reasons to avoid this game. First is, I think if you're not experienced with tabletop role-playing games, I wouldn't say that this is the one to start with. I would start with one that's a little bit more forgiving. So if you're a total newbie to the genre, unless you're like a diehard Cthulhu Lovecraft fan, I would probably steer away from it. And the other one is if you are not a fan of role-playing, you just want to do, because, like we've said, this is a very role-play heavy system, and the combat is punished. And a lot of the times it is just better. And if that doesn't sound appealing to you, this is...
Yeah, I would say, like, basically what I said about, like, no loot in Cthulhu being a con is, like, if you're playing the game for the reward, then Cthulhu might not be the one for you, but if you're playing for the challenge, then it is the one for you, you know? You're not playing to hit... Yeah, you're not, like, paying to hit the, like, ding, I leveled up button, you know? Yep. You're playing more to just see if you can survive.
Yeah. I would say that the big one in my eyes, which isn't, again, another problem for me, because I love horror and I really like H.P. Lovecraft and the kind of worlds that he built and stuff like that. But unless you're into those kind of genres of, you know, mind-twisting stuff or weird horror, even, like, in a certain sense... H.P. Lovecraft in the horror sense is very different than what a lot of people would even define horror as. And so if you're not willing to, if you don't enjoy those kinds of genres, then you're going to hate every second of this, because you're not going to be able to throw yourself into it and actually enjoy it and just wait to see where everything's going to roll. If you're just like, oh, it's going to be a stupid jump scare, or it's going to be, you know, this guy, like, you can totally throw yourself out of the atmosphere of horror just by not willing to buy into it. And so unless you can do that or are wanting to do that, you're going to probably find it to be a heavy slog.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Jaden, of the idea that you have to commit. You have to really say to yourself, I'm going to be in the moment for this. And if a curveball gets thrown your way, going with it rather than resisting it. And so if you're not a malleable person, you're not open to just kind of rolling with the punches, which in this case can be deadly, then you really should stay away from it. Adversely, why should people spend the money to invest? This can cost upwards to about $200 depending on how much shipping costs you and where you get it from, to invest in basically the starting system, which would be the rule book for the keeper, the investigator handbook, and the screen, which does come with 2 really nice scenarios. But obviously that is a lot of money. So why should people be willing to take the dive in a system?
I'd say if you are familiar with systems like Pathfinder or Dungeons and Dragons, and you are wanting to do something, this does something different. Wonder. It's like I said before, it's familiar enough that you'll be able to pick it up pretty quickly, but it's different enough that it doesn't feel stale. It's clearly inspired by a deep love for somebody who's a fantastic storyteller, and it takes that spirit of storytelling and mystery and unease, and it expertly put to gameplay. Yeah, I think if you're looking for something that's different but still familiar, go with that.
I think you kind of took a lot of words right out of my mouth with that one. It's familiar but different, and that's like one of the coolest parts of it. But another one is I like that it's scalable and can be as bite-sized or as big as you want it to be. Mm-hmm. I played 4 different adventures now and had 4 different characters, and I didn't feel like I was abandoning my level 12 ranger or whatever, Yeah. I was excited to create another character to go do something different. And each different thing, because of how dangerous they are and how beat up you generally come out after it, you're encouraged to create a character. And there's just so many different unique builds and occupations and stuff that I'd want to experiment with and try and roleplay. If you like role-playing different characters, Cthulhu is epic. In D&D or other games that are more combat focused, even if you have a cool idea for a character, you still have to make it in a way that it can kill stuff, It has to be combat effective. Whereas in here, you could be a photographer or just a bum on the street that plays guitar for change or whatever, and you're could be equally effective.
I would say that the biggest reason that I like it, or the big part of it, is I think if you're over the whole hero fantasy that so many games are, you got to be that center character, you got to be that most important thing in the world, and you are the one thing that is standing against insanity and the whole world falling apart. I like that it's just a lot more bite-sized in the sense that yes, you are doing stuff and we have a certain amount of impact, but you are by no means the main person in this whole world, and everyone should know you, and that's just crucial, right? I think that it's a lot more applicable to real life, and I think that I personally am finding that I like stories that I can connect to a lot more, because nobody is some indestructible hero that can just solve all problems and never have any struggle at all. It's just, when you get into those things, I feel they kind of feel fake in a certain sense. Yeah. Sometimes it's fun to do it, but it doesn't feel real.
We were just guys trying to get free rent, which I think is something we can all identify with. Today, if somebody was we'll pay your mortgage if you go into this creepy house, I'll bring a picnic basket.
Yeah.
It's almost that reliance on the postmodern, the idea that there are no heroes in grand adventures. There are ordinary people whose story either ends without meaning or doesn't end. And yet at the same time, the lore behind it is grand and epic, and it is mythos. From my perspective, running the game behind the scenes as Dungeon Master Keeper, it is a way for me to flex my artistic muscles and really try to tell a story that I want to tell, even if it's a small idea that goes into something big. Obviously, I didn't create this story. Chaosium did, and it is based on the traditional haunted house story, but even that has its twists and turns that, from the keeper perspective, you can build upon and tweak and do little things here and there. And so for me, if you are looking to tell a story through a game and have people respond to it, this is why you should invest in. You would want to be able to deliver something that will have people respond and react, and then at the end of the day, you all walk away feeling like you've created something bigger than yourselves.
Yeah.
And with that, guys, that is the Call of Cthulhu by Chaosium. My name is Ruin Ortega. You can find me on Instagram at Ruin Ortega. You can also find Cantrips and Coffee basically on any social media. If you go to Twitter, Cantrips and Coffee, because character limits are a thing apparently. However, Cade, where can people find you?
I'm on most things as Cade Bengert. If you can spell that, go for it. On Twitter, it's G1Cade. Yeah.
Perfect. Jaden, where can people find you?
Nowhere. I'm not worth finding. I don't put anything on social media that anyone would care to see, really.
Fair enough. Maybe they'll find you here again, right?
Yeah, hopefully.
All right. Jody, where can people find you?
I'm going to plead the fifth, give that same answer. I don't have like a personal like Twitter handle or anything that's not just my like stream stuff. If you want, I can re-record this part and make a Twitter handle for the podcast, but...
Well, I was going to say you could totally shout out your gaming channel.
Yeah, I just kind of want to keep it separate. This is its thing, that's its thing, you know?
Okay, well, we'll leave it at you pleading the fifth.
Yeah.
I'm going to include all of this.
Yes, that's fine.
Conversation.
Yeah. All right. If you're with us till the end, thank you for listening, and we will see you on our next episode, which we are going to call Side Table, taking topics and different role-playing rules and just kind of having a good old conversation about them. We're out for now.